Amen. So we're in week 2 of our series titled Breakout. And what we're hoping to do is help all of us, that God would help all of us through this series to break out of maybe some routines and patterns, or just break out of some beliefs and thoughts that we've had so that we can become everything that God has designed us to be. With that said, in 2017, one of the nation's top three credit companies, Equifax, was hacked. And with that, 143 million people's information was exposed as a result of this hack. And so that gave people, whoever hacked, it gave them access to bank reports and credit reports and bank statements and credit card ledgers and all of these things. And so in that moment, the risk of fraud greatly increased because of the compromise of security, of people's security, and the exposure of identity. And what's interesting is that this kind of monitoring is actually really a wise thing. There's all kinds of apps and programs that you can apply to that will allow you to monitor your identity so that no one hacks into a system and steals your identity and uses it to open other accounts and spend all your money and do all the things that you don't want people doing with your information. Even if, and this is a wise thing to do, even if Equifax had never even been hacked, it took a crisis to remind many of us how important our identity is, and it took a crisis to remind us that we should be doing what we should have been doing all along, monitoring our identity. Now, this is a common challenge for many of us who are adults. What I mean by that is this: we only change as a result of crisis. You've heard me say this before. My mentor taught me this years ago. He says that the only people that like change are babies, and they cry through the whole process, right? So we don't like it when life gets interrupted, but it's the crisis in life. It's those things it's that crisis in that moment in our life that actually causes us to pause and consider some things that we probably should have been considering all along, one of which would be our identity. Now, without a change to the status quo, and without a change to our normal routines, we resist change, and we don't reflect on things as we ought to or we probably should. One area that we often don't reflect on, or we should reflect on, is that very thing. It's our identity. We don't think about how we define ourselves. We don't think about who we are until some outside event brings some new awareness or some new tension into our life, and we call these outside events change. Now, I want to put this on the screen because it's important, I think, for us to just kind of grab a hold of. When change happens, our identity will be challenged. When change happens, our identity will be challenged. Think about it. When the status quo is maintained, when everything in your life is just functioning within rhythm the way you've planned it out, when your days, when your Monday through Friday and even your weekends go as scheduled, life feels all right. Life feels okay, and we are hidden in the identity of whatever those things are. When our lives are in rhythm and our routine is settled, it allows us to find safety and comfort because I am statements are easy in that moment, are they not? Let me give you some examples so that you can kind of track with me. I am statements that are based off of routine and identity, that form our identity, would be something like this: I am a middle school or high school student. The reason that you would say that is because Monday through Friday, you go to that school, you attend that campus, you are in those grades. I am a middle school or high school student. Had this talk with Asher the other day about how he feels. Asher's going to be, he's our youngest, he's 5th grade, he's going to be going into middle school next year. And I said, hey bud, like man, how you feeling about moving out of the elementary school and the going up to the middle school? I said, are you excited or are you nervous? He said, a little bit of both. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm excited because, I'm getting older. It means I'm moving up in grade, and now there's going to be just different. It's different, like school's going to be different. Different teachers will change classes. There's going to be some different things that I'm kind of excited about. And I said, okay, well, what makes you anxious? And he said, there's going to be big kids there, He said, like, all of a sudden, I'm going to go from the oldest in the school to now, like, extremely young. And it's even more, that's even tougher when you're thinking about our school system, because there's middle schoolers walking down hallways with 18-year-olds. So that's a little bit of a change. And so we find our identity in who, like, that I am a middle school student or a high school student. Or here's some other things in how we identify ourselves. I'm in a relationship with, and we fill in the blank. As a matter of fact, we often identify as this by changing our relationship status on social media. I am, and there's your name, in a relationship with, right? And that happens. And so we find our comfort in our identity because we are attached to someone else. That I am the boyfriend or girlfriend of, fill in the blank, and so I find my identity in that. Or, how about this one? I am a baseball player, football player, soccer player, tennis player, track runner, like I am, and we fill in the backside of that statement with, this is who I am because this is what I do. Or how about this for us older folks? I am married. I am married. So when we fill out applications, certain applications, it wants to know marital status. And so you check, I'm married, or I'm single, or I'm whatever. And so we identify by our relationship status even as adults. Or how about this one? We identify as our profession. So who are you? I am you fill in the blank, whatever your profession is, and I am employed by this person or this company. I am a whatever, and I am employed by whoever. That's our identity. We find our identity, and we wake up every day, and we go to work, or we go to school, and we find our identity in those things. And as long as those things stay consistent and constant and the same, we have this level of comfort. But when something changes that breaks that identity, that's when the crisis sets in, and that's when we have our identity crisis. Now, these are just a few examples, and as long as, again, nothing changes, then our identity feels secure. But what we're all really smart enough to know is that there is one constant in life. And the one constant in life is what? Change. Sometime between 970 and 930 BC, Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes 3:1 these words, "For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven." In 1965, a group named the Byrds would come along and they would put that into song and they would sing it, turn, turn, turn. You guys probably have heard that. Probably some of you have, probably a lot of you have not. Because here's the reality, that change is inevitable. One day, you will all finish school. One day, you will all have a status change in your job. Sometimes relationships sadly come to an end, whether that's a dating relationship or whether that's a marriage or whether that's a friendship or whether that's a work partnership. At some point, relationships come to an end. Some jobs, they don't work out. Whether it's they don't work out for you because it wasn't good, or sometimes it's because of your employer. Just sometimes things don't work out, and then you go through these job changes. And here's what's interesting, that when we face job changes or when we face relationship changes, especially as adults, what happens is our identity is so tied to those things that we go into that identity crisis mode. Like we lose ourselves because we don't know who we are because it was tied to these things. This week, I was listening to Craig Groeschel's Leadership podcast. If you guys don't listen to it, I highly encourage you to grab onto that and listen to it. And he was interviewing a Harvard professor named Arthur Brooks. And during the podcast, Brooks said something that struck me. It grabbed me, it gripped me. And when I heard it, I hit rewind several times to listen to the statement that he made. Because when he said it, I didn't just hear it, I felt it. And so let me share with you what he said. He was speaking about the different stages of life and the identity crises that come with those stages. And he spoke of how these things can create great fear in us. I love the songs that we sang this morning. I'm no longer a slave to fear because I am a child of God. The fear mechanism becomes really important in our faith journey. And this is what Arthur Brooks said. He said this: "What I am afraid of is losing who I see myself as." Man, there is no greater identity crisis than that, right? I mean, that's when we feel disoriented. Life can become this space and this place where we can't make sense of it, because for this long, for X number of months or X number of years, my identity was I'm in a relationship with this person and this is the type of relationship I have. Or for so many years or so many months, I have been in this school system, or I have been in this school. I have been a student, and now graduation happens and we transition and we move, and it's like I don't know what's next, and I don't know what my identity is, because in that next time and space, I don't know who I am there. I know who I am here. I just don't know who I am over there. Or when we think about our relationships with other people, I don't know who I am because I'm now no longer attached. I don't know who I am because I'm no longer in this space. Or maybe it's a job. This has been my career for X number of months or years, and all of a sudden this career isn't what it was, or this career isn't what I hoped it would be, or suddenly I've just decided that it's now time for a change, and people move. And we leave that profession, we leave that place, and we have a hard time. It's disorienting because we've never seen ourselves or imagined ourselves outside of what we were. And so we fall into this identity crisis. As a matter of fact, in that podcast, one of the things that he talks about is this very thing, and there's this occurrence, this thing that happens inside of our heads, that the way our brains process information, there's a reason, there is a scientifically backed reason that you can, again, you have to go listen to the podcast. I'm not going to unpack that here. But there's a scientific reason why people go through what's called a midlife crisis. And it all revolves around identity. It's incredible. And so what I want to challenge us to do, and what I want to begin to challenge us to think about, is what do you do? What do you do when you're losing you? What do you do? What do you do when you find yourself in this moment where you're in an identity crisis? I don't know who I am. I don't know what this next season of life is going to look like. I don't know who I am in the next season of life because I don't know how to identify in that. And we live in this crazy world today where more and more people are struggling with what? Identity. We see more and more people struggling with identity, whether it's identity from the perspectives that we've talked about. I mean, my goodness, unfortunately, we have these young people these days that are they're 6 and 7 years old going, I don't know if I'm a boy or a girl. It's like, I'm pretty sure that's on your birth certificate. You can check that, right? It's complete insanity to me that we have people, adults in this world today, that would try to help a kid become something that they're not when they don't even know who they are, only to have regrets later in life and go through depression. It's demonic is what it is. It's absolutely demonic. And so these people, as they struggle with identity, what do we do? What do you do when you feel like you're losing you? What do you do when you feel like you're losing who you are, who you've been, and you're struggling with what your identity is? Well, what do we do when all of our identity statements change from I am to I am no longer, or I am not? What do we do? Exodus chapter 3 is where we're going to be. We're going to begin in verse 1. Before we do that, in case you don't know the story of Moses, let me give you a quick overview. As an infant, Moses was placed in a basket, sent down the river by his mother. Why would a mother do that? Well, if you're not from a Bible background, it's because Pharaoh had issued the execution of all newborns, trying to snuff him out and snuff them out, and snuff out the Israelites and cut down the population. And so his mom sends him down the river in a basket in an attempt to save his life, sends him down the river, and then he's discovered and found in the basket by Pharaoh's daughter. So then Pharaoh's daughter takes him in, and now all of a sudden Moses is being raised in Pharaoh's palace. He's being raised in Pharaoh's presence. And so with that comes a lot of benefits. It comes a lot of power and authority. I mean, he's living in a very nice place. He's getting the best education. He's being raised by the most powerful man on the planet. And then there comes this moment. One day, he's around 40 years old, and Pharaoh, not Pharaoh, but a worker for Pharaoh, a soldier, he's being mean, he's torturing, he's abusing a Hebrew slave, and Moses takes issue with that because Moses, he does know he's a Hebrew, and Moses murders the guy who's being brutal towards this Hebrew slave, and he murders him. And when he murders him, word gets back to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says, here's what I'm going to do about this. I'm going to find Moses, and I'm going to take Moses out. And so Moses flees to a land called Midian. And so while he's there, while he's in Midian, he meets a guy named Jethro. Moses then ultimately marries Jethro's daughter, and then Moses becomes a shepherd. So Moses has gone from living in the palace to being a shepherd in the middle of the desert. Now, that's an identity crisis. And not only that, but he went from being a friend of Pharaoh, someone who lives in his home, maybe an adopted child, to an enemy of Pharaoh. And now there's these fears that he lives with, which is why he flees. Now, you talk about identity crisis. Who is he now? Moses went from the palace to the desert. His job status went from royalty to shepherd. He went from the penthouse to the outhouse. Y'all know what I'm saying? Like things were not going well. He went from safety to wanted, and so he runs to Midian. And this is where all this stuff happens. And for another 40 years, so 40 years with Pharaoh, 40 years in the desert, and at the end of this 40 years, or during this 40 years, at the end of this, as he's tending sheep, this is what happens next. This is the next moment in his life, and it's a moment that Moses will discover who he is, and perhaps more importantly, who he's not. Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. Read with me. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. It's also believed that Mount Horeb is also Mount Sinai, which is an interesting thing when you consider the story of Moses and how they end up back there receiving the commandments from God. And an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame. This is a Christophany. The angel of the Lord is believed to have been Jesus pre-incarnate. And so this is, you see these pop up here and there throughout the Old Testament. It says, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of the bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. By the way, in the Old Testament, when you see flames, it's representative of the Holy Spirit. You know, when they were in the wilderness, wandering around, going from place to place, they were led by a pillar of fire, right? Like this fire in front of them, and it was representative of the people of Israel being led by the Holy Spirit. And what I love here, the beautiful thing about this is it says Moses looks at the burning bush, and yet it was not consumed. And the reason is because the Holy Spirit never runs out of fuel. You know what I mean? Like that's why we're told to walk in the Spirit. Walk in the Spirit. We've been given this power, and it never runs out. And so Moses stops. He says, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, and he said, now what does he say right there? Here I am, okay? Moses says, here I am. Then he said, do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. So what do we do? What do you do when you feel like you're losing you? What do we do when identity crisis hits? Number one, if you're taking notes, and I hope you are, number one, you are a who, not a where. When Moses said, or when God calls out and says, Moses, Moses, then he said, here I am. Again, oftentimes we have this propensity to identify ourselves with where we are. And let me just say it this way. It's amazing to me that Moses is being called to out of a burning bush. So Moses, it stops him in his tracks. And he said, I need to stop and see what this thing is. Like, I need to give attention to this. And let me just say this for us all. When we're going through an identity crisis, one thing that we also probably ought to write down is attention gives definition. What you pay attention to will ultimately end up defining you. So can I ask you a question? If attention gives definition and we're a who, not a where, can I ask you this? What are you afraid of? What do you fear? So again, I love that we were singing these songs about I'm no longer a slave of fear. See, and here's what we need to understand. There are phobias and there are fears. Anybody in here have any phobias? Like arachnophobia, anybody? Spiders? Like okay, everybody's good with them. Next week, we're just going to have the floor full of spiders since y'all are all good. We're going to find out. Yeah. Me personally, ophidiophobia is fear. Does anybody know that one? Snakes. I don't like snakes. Listen, we will never, ever, ever, ever be a snake handle in church. You know what I mean? Because like your pastor, not touching them. By the way, I heard somebody say this week. It has nothing to do with the message, but you'll appreciate it. He was talking about, man, we're so country, even the Presbyterians handle snakes. You know what I mean? That's how country Osceola is. That's how far off in the middle of nowhere we are. The fear of snakes. But here's the thing. So we're talking about fears. There's phobias and fears. The fear of snakes, a phobia, ophidiophobia. I don't fear snakes on a regular basis. And the reason that I don't is because, snakes, they don't impact my daily living. Why? Because I don't just like every day, I don't daily encounter snakes. It's when I encounter them and they startle me that I get a little afraid. And I'm just being honest. Like, I've seen people like handle snakes. I've seen people go, hey, like I got a pet snake. And he won't bite you. I don't care if you walked in here with a snake and said, I can guarantee you he won't bite you. I got his mouth taped shut. Man, I ain't touching it. Like, it just gives me the creeps just looking at it. Like, it makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. I just don't like snakes. And I don't fear them because I don't typically encounter them. But the moment I do, I typically experience a certain measure of fear. Now, if I'm far away, I might be a little fascinated by them, but I'm not going to get close to them. Y'all ever see, there's a video that floated around years ago on social media. There was a guy, and he's sitting in the woods on like some pine straw, and he's got his camera rolling, and he's like, there's a rattlesnake like 2 feet away from me, and it's sitting like right here, and it's rattling. And I'm like, first of all, like that, I'm just telling, like that just wigs me out, okay? And for whatever reason, I kept watching the video. I was like, okay, is this guy going to be safe? Is he going to get away? And if you've never seen it, what happens is he's like staying perfectly still. And he's like, I have to stay perfectly still because I don't want to get bit by this guy out in the middle of the woods. And I'm like, why are you sitting down next to one? And then the snake crawls up on his lap. You're with me. All right, I know who my people are. It crawls up on his lap, and he's still recording like, hey, like this is really scary. And I'm like, you think? And then eventually, like it loses interest in him. He stays still long enough that it crawls off of his lap and it starts to go this way. And so his genius idea of how to get the snake to move away quicker is to reach over with a stick and tap it on the tail. Well, as soon as he does that, it whips back around, and I'm like, oh my gosh. Eventually, the snake crawls far enough away, and he jumps up. That's the end of the video. Now, if that were me, and you asked me in that moment, like if you walked up on that, and that snake's sitting on my lap, and he's right there, and you walked up and you said, who are you? I'm not going, hey, I'm Billy Stevens. I'm saying, I am afraid of snakes. Get this thing off of me. That's who I am in this moment. Why? Because attention gives definition. The only thing that I'm focused on in that moment is that snake. And the only identity that I can grab for myself is I am afraid of snakes. That is who I am in this moment. Now, Moses, in his routine, he's in it. Like he's just kind of going through the stages and phases of his day. He's out being a shepherd, doing what shepherds do, leading sheep to find water, to find food. That's what Moses is doing. And in that moment, something out of his ordinary happens. There's a bush that's on fire and it's not being consumed. And so in an ordinary to break up, or an effort to break up the ordinary and get Moses to break out of his identity crisis, he calls to him from this burning bush. See, change is uncomfortable. And what we know and what we say around here a lot is growth doesn't happen in comfort zones. So God tends to get the greatest amount of our attention. Is this not true? God tends to get the greatest amount of our attention in our greatest moments of discomfort. Think about the moments in your life when you have really chased after God with all of your heart. It usually comes in a crisis moment that you begin to say, I've got to pray about this because I can't do anything about it. And so we begin to go to God and we go, God, I need to understand some things. I need you to help me out in this moment. And so God tends to get the greatest amount of our attention in our greatest moments of discomfort. And when he has our greatest attention, it's only then that he can give us the clearest definition of who we are. You need to understand, and you and I need to understand on a regular basis what our identity is and what our identity is not. Moses' response to his call is he says, "Here I am." Moses gives him a location. Now again, he called Moses' name. It's like being in class. Remember the days in class when, I don't know if they still do this or not, but John, here. Jerry, here. Susie, here, right? And so what we're saying in that moment, here I am, I'm present. But here's the reality is Moses gives him a location, God's going to give him a vocation. Moses informs God of where, and now God is going to remind him of who he is. So here is a question for you and me to entertain this morning. Where are you? Right now, where are you? Are you in a position on a daily basis? Did you walk in here this morning in a position where you would be at a place in your life where you could hear God call your name? Or are you just so caught up in the routine of your life that instead of noticing the call of God from the burning bush, you just kept walking right on by because, somebody's got to tend to the sheep? And that's my greatest fear, is that we would show up in church every single Sunday. Jesus walks through, has a word for you, and we miss it because we're like, hey, man, he's almost done because we're getting close to wrap-up time. And then when we get done, I'm just worried about where are we going to go eat and what are we going to do? And then the rest of the week, I know tomorrow, like we got pre-K graduation this afternoon, and then this week, and I've got this on my schedule, and we completely miss hearing Jesus speak. Just because you know where you are doesn't mean that you know who you are. Just because you know that you go to school at certain school, just because you know that you go to church at certain church, just because you know that you have a job or where you have your job, just because you know where you are in your life doesn't mean that you know who you are. And let me tell you something, you are one crisis away, you are one change away, you are one thing away from one moment away from having a severe identity crisis. And it's sad to see the statistical numbers of people today that are taking their life, that are dealing with depression. I was reading a poll earlier this week, and it said that between the ages of 16 and 34, that like 63% of people struggle with depression, suicidal thoughts that are related to identity issues. And you could ask them a lot of questions, and they could tell you where they are, but they can't tell you who they are. Verse 7 through 10, then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their suffering, and here's the thing that we need to understand. Like when we're reading these verses, look at the pronouns, okay? Let me start over. Pay attention to the pronouns. And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. What are the first 5 words there? Come, I will send. Well, wait a minute, God. You're the one that heard the cry. You're the one that knows what the problem is. You're the one that says that you've come down here to do something about it. Why don't you go? And if I'm Moses, I don't want to go back and face Pharaoh. The last time I heard anything from Pharaoh, he had put a bounty out on my head. And if I go waltzing right back into his place, his palace, then all he's going to do is destroy me. I mean, who am I? Who am I that I would be able to go stand in front of Pharaoh? And it's interesting because he says, come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Again, not necessarily my notes, but let me just say this. Whose job is it to go reach the lost in this community? Every single person. How are we doing? How are you doing? Because I think sometimes what we do is, well, somebody will do it. I mean, somebody will get to it. I mean, the pastors, they go to the schools, they go into the community, they'll do it. Somebody else will do it. But what we see God tell Moses is, I'm sending you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. So if you're taking notes, point number 2, you're a who, not a what. If you were a who, not a where, you're also a who, not a what. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness because of a murder. See, we have a tendency, too, to base our identity off of things that we've done in the past, good or bad. We're going to talk about those in a second, but good or bad. Like we begin to say that, well, I'm just not God could never use me because I'm a what? I'm a sinner. I'm a gossiper. You fill in the blank. And we do that to ourselves. And Moses has spent 40 years in the wilderness because of a murder, and God needed to remind him of who he was by sending him. This is who I created you to be. I'm sending you. Peter would have experienced a very similar situation. We know the story. Peter denies Jesus 3 times before the resurrection. Then after the resurrection, Jesus shows up on the beach. Peter has gone back to fishing with some of the other disciples. Jesus is up on the shore, calls Peter to the shore. Peter swims to the shore, and as he walks up to Jesus, there's a charcoal fire, which is the only 2 places in the New Testament the word for charcoal fire is used, is there on the beach, and the moment that Peter denied Jesus the 3rd time. And then he's telling Peter, hey, bring some fish, come over here. And then he says to Peter, do you love me? And he asked him 3 times, which obviously reminded Peter of the reality that you had denied me 3 times. And so now he's saying, do you love me 3 times? And every time he says, feed my sheep. In other words, Peter, what you did, I knew was going to happen because I told you were going to deny me 3 times, but it has not disqualified you from who you are and who I called you to be. What you did does not define who you are. And so we are a who, we are not a what. We are not the thing that we've done. Exodus 3:11 through 15. We'll wrap up. But Moses said to God, here it is. Great question. Not a great finish to the question, but what does he say? Who am I? Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, now here's some very important 5 words. We saw some a minute ago, go, I will send you. Now he says, but what? I will be with you. Moses, I will be with you. Underline those in your Bible. I will be with you. And this shall be a sign for you that I have sent you. When, this is so good. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. So again, they're going to make their way back to Sinai, and they're going to receive the 10 Commandments there. Then Moses, which is interesting. It's like, all right, Moses, I'm going to give you a sign. And here's the sign. You'll see it when the job's done. How many of you are going, that makes me really comfortable? Like, you want me to walk into the lion's den, but you're telling me that I'll know that you were speaking to me and you were telling the truth about what you were going to do and that you were going to be with me after. And that's where a lot of us have a problem is we don't walk by faith. We walk by sight. And we missed out on the thing that God, the miraculous event that God wants to do in you because you're like, God, you're going to have to give me some proof up front. That's not faith. Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? So this is Moses' attempt to try and get out of going. Y'all ever do that with God, or is it just me? God, I mean, if you could find somebody else, like I'm a little busy. God, if you could find somebody else, I don't know if I can pull that one off. And this is Moses' attempt. And so Moses says, God, what is, if they say, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And God says to Moses, look at these 5 words. These are powerful words. I am who I am. I guess it's not up there. I am who I am. The God of your fathers has sent me to you. If they ask, what is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all of the generations. Who am I? And there's more to this story, obviously. But Moses, when God calls him, Moses says to God, God, I'm not powerful enough. I am not eloquent enough of speech. I'm not persuasive. I am not. And Moses tries to work his way out of it by telling God what his identity is through a series of I am nots. And here's the thing that God is going to say to Moses, and I think he would say to me and you this morning. In all of our I am nots, that when we are struggling with our identity, like, God, who am I? And we would say, well, I am not, I am not, I am not. I think what Moses comes to understand and what we need to understand is I am not, but I know I am. I am who I am. I am not, but I know God, and I know what he's called me to do. And he said, he's sending me. He said he would be with me. And he says that I am the great I am. So, last point, and then I'm going to rapid fire through some stuff and get you out of here, okay? Last point. Who is defined by your Father, not your failure? Who, you're a who, not a where. You're a who, not a what. And the who that you are is defined by your Father, not by your failure. Moses was not a murderer, though he did murder. Moses was not a shepherd, though he would be used as a shepherd to shepherd people, not sheep. And it was defined by his Father, not his failure. Now, I want to look at a few things real quick. Some misconceptions that we often apply to our identity in this world, okay? Here's a few things. Write these down. Ways that we identify ourselves, which are not good. Number one, I am what I have. When we buy into this lie, we accept the message that everything is about what I can consume. It's about consumerism, that we think of accumulation, and the more that we accumulate, the more we have an identity. But all that does is really, honestly, those things lead us to feel more insecure than ever. Number two, I am what I do. That I am a job title, I am a role, and we're good at defining ourselves that way. And then one day we retire or we have a career change and identity crisis sets in, and this is a dangerous place or a dangerous way to identify ourselves. Another dangerous way to identify ourselves is I am what other people say or think of me. I tell you, one of the freest moments in your life, and I'm telling you this was because this is who I was, and I still wrestle with it at times. The day that you'll quit caring about what people think of you is the day that you will be free to be who God called you to be. And due to social media and modern technology, man, I'm just telling you, the contribution of depression and all these things and identity crisis in our world is on the increase because of the stuff that's being shoved in front of your kid's face with a cell phone. Take the cell phone away. Take the cell phone away. Or at least be careful of what you're allowing them to see, because I'm telling you, the world is telling them through all of this stuff, this is who you are. Pull your kid's phone out one day and go through their social media and look at the algorithm, and it'll tell you what they're paying attention to, and that's what that thing's just continually spitting out to them. I mean, we never had some of these crises in the world until social media became an epidemic, and then it started shoving all this stuff in our kids' faces, and they're like, I don't know, maybe I am a girl, or maybe I am a boy. Foolishness. And in an effort to keep our kids happy with us, we go, oh, yeah, here, this won't hurt you. It's worse than a crack pipe. And I'm not trying to steal all the kids' fun away, but I'm just saying, Parents, please monitor what your kids are looking at. Monitor what your kids are paying attention to, because it's shaping the way they see themselves and perceive themselves. I'm not what other people think of me. It's not about how many likes I can get, how many followers I can get, how many friends I have. I am who God says I am. Number 4, I am nothing more than my worst moments. These are dangerous identity statements. I am nothing more than my worst moments. We've all had moments that we wish we could take back. We've all had these moments where things have just gone awry. But who we are is bigger than any one moment, so pay attention to that. Number 5, the fifth identity issue is I am nothing less than my best moment. So I'm nothing more than my worst moment, but I'm nothing less than my best moment. We often build our identity on our successes and our greatest moments, and that's good to have successes and greatest moments, but we don't typically tend to live there, do we? So how do we fix this? How do we handle these things? If you've bought into these lies, now what do we do? You know, how do we issue, or how do we deal with all of these issues? One of the things that I would say is there's 5 truths about our identities. Number 1, there's no product that's ever going to make you feel secure. Okay, no product is ever going to make you feel secure. Who you are is the gift that you've received from God. Number 2, what I do flows out of who I am. Let your identity form your activity, not the other way around. Number 3, I can either live for the approval of others or I can live for the approval of Jesus. And I would much rather be approved by him than be approved by man. Number 4, I'm not a failure. I'm not a failure. You need to understand that. You need to tell yourself that. You're not a failure. See, a failure is an event, never a person. We might fail at times, but that's an event. That's a moment. It's never a person. And then lastly, I'm not defined by my success. While failure is an event, success is a process. It's not a destination. Success is something that you continually work at. You're always going to work towards improvement. You're always going to work towards some things. Now, all that to say this, as we wrap up, and I'm going to ask Clint to come. Where do you find your identity today? Where are you in all of this? Do you find yourself creating enough space in your life to be able to hear God call you from the burning bush moments? Or do you find yourself just traveling through life, doing your routine, living in fear that if I don't keep all the balls up in the air, that I might lose my identity in the process? I want to encourage you, carve out time. Listen to God. Hear his voice. Let him tell you who you are so that your activity can flow from your identity. And then no matter what comes your way in life, you'll begin to understand that I'm not my success. I'm not my failure. I'm not a what I've done. I'm not a where I've been. I'm a who. I'm a person that God loved, gave himself for, that he might be redeemed, set free from being a slave to the things of the world, set free to become an ambassador for Jesus Christ, that in his power and in his name, I can walk into the presence of the most powerful person on the planet, and I can declare what God's word has said, and I am not ashamed.